Do you own a rental property in Ventura County? If so, you need to listen to this podcast. All right, welcome to another episode of the Accidental Landlord Podcast. I'm your host, Peter McKenzie. And today is going to be short and sweet. It's just going to be me. We're going to be talking about a new law. So we wanted to call attention to this particular law because it is going to basically affect all landlords. There are a couple exceptions, but for the most part, everybody's going to have to take a bite of this sandwich, and it's not really in the best interest of landlords, but it is going to affect you. So whether you have a professional management company managing your property or you manage a property on your own, all the same, you need to know about this new law. And the new law that we're talking about is Assembly Bill 12. This law was passed a few months ago, and it takes effect on July 1st, 2024. And essentially, here is the gist of it. No longer, they're changing how much you can charge a tenant for a security deposit. You can know right now, currently, you can charge 2 months for an unfurnished rental and 3 months for a furnished rental. They're taking that away. I think the rationale behind this is they think that the high cost of security deposits is preventing some people from finding housing. And obviously, housing is a politically hot button issue out there right now. So the new law, in its current shape, is, like I said, taking effect on January 1st. You're not allowed to ask over 1 month security deposit for a tenant who's going to move into your property. So if you have a tenant or not a tenant, but an applicant who wants to live in one of your properties, and you use the security deposit as a way to offset some of the risk, maybe there's risk associated with some income issues or some previous rental references or some credit issues, some collection issues. Landlords in the past would sometimes charge a higher security deposit to offset that risk. That is going away because of this new law. And the problem with that is it's probably, and all of this is unknown because it hasn't actually gone into effect and we have to wait and see what actually happens, but probably a landlord that's looking at an application that's like on the bubble, questionable whether they're qualified or not, will probably err on the side of not renting to a person who has some issues in their background from their application that they screened. Because they don't have the ability to charge more security deposit, which is a benefit to the landlord, because let's say you do make a decision to rent to someone that's marginally qualified, but you charge them 2 months security deposit, you have a little leeway. If they stop paying the rent, you can process an eviction, and by the time you get them out, potentially you have enough still funds in the security deposit to take and make sure that you're made whole on rent. That's one scenario. The other scenario is if you make it harder for landlords, they're going to be less tolerant to taking on risks that they don't want to take on. And this is really like a knee-jerk kind of law. They're trying to make it easier for people to get properties, but and this is just my personal opinion, I think they're going to actually have the opposite effect. I think landlords are going to tighten up their requirements for being approved for applications. And this is an area that the law hasn't really got involved and legislated. Obviously, there's things like fair housing, protected classes. That's definitely not what we're talking about. We're talking about data that you analyze as a landlord, like, does this person have a job? Can they document their income? What have previous landlords said about them? What's their credit score? Do they have money in collections? Are there bankruptcies? Objectifiable data that you can look at and make a decision on. Those are the things that landlords were using to make decisions. Now, if you take away something that they use to offset the cost or offset the risk, it's going to make it harder. In my opinion, they're going to tighten up, and it's going to make it harder for tenants to get properties. That's negative. That is like counterproductive to what I think they were trying to accomplish when they passed the law. Okay, so let's talk about what's not changing. So if you're a landlord, you still are able to go after your tenant if your tenant damages the property. So let's say they make the new law, you can only charge 1 month's rent. You have a tenant moves in, charge them 1 month's rent. They move out and they do damages that exceed the 1 month's rent. So you still have the legal right to go after your tenant, depending on the dollar amount of damage. Usually it's small claims court, and try to get that out of them. So although you didn't have it in a security deposit, it doesn't mean you can't go after them. But I'm here to tell you from experience and from doing this for a while, it's really hard to collect a judgment against a tenant. It's almost impossible. And there's not a lot of success that people have. You can send them to, you can go to small claims court, get a judgment, send it to a collections company, do all of those things. But the collection rates on those are so laughable that it's basically impossible to collect it. But that's not changing with this law, which, I mean, in some respects is good. Let's talk about exemptions, because there are some carved out exemptions in the law. The first one is for a small landlord who doesn't have more than 2 properties with a maximum of 4 units. So that could be like you have 2 duplexes. It's 2 properties, not more than 4 units. Technically, they are exempt from this law. However, that's not as easy as it sounds, because there's a lot of different ways to own property, especially, where we live, actually all over the country. You might have property in a trust, you might have property in an LLC, you might have multiple LLCs, and the law is not clear if that all counts as one person or not. I could, make the argument that it's 2 separate companies that hold a property, then you're exempt. But the way they write these laws, I think, is intentionally vague so that they have leeway to go further legislate the law with a judge. So just know that if you meet the exemption, great. There are going to be people who make arguments that they meet the exemption that more than likely a judge won't agree with you. And then that'll set the precedence for the rest of us who will now have to live by that decision. So just keep that in mind. In our case, obviously we manage properties professionally. We are going through an audit process, if you will, categorizing all the properties that are owned by our clients. Another area here that's gray is, what if you own property out of state? Is it only 2 properties in California, or is it more than 2 properties total, no matter where the properties are at? That's a question that's not really answered in the law. So we're going through trying to take an inventory of all properties owned so we can keep our clients compliant with this. That's a lot of work when you manage properties at scale. If you're a small landlord, if you're a really small landlord, then you're exempt. Then that's best case scenario for you. But if you're not exempt, you have to follow the law. What's not clear to me, and I've done a little digging, is what happens if you don't follow the law? What happens if you charge more than 1 month security deposit? Not super clear in the law. My guess is nothing good is going to come from that. And, that's probably a little bit of legal exposure that you don't want to have. And we are absolutely not advocating for you not to follow this law. You absolutely should follow the law. The main reason we wanted to do this podcast on this particular law by itself is because it's basically going to affect everyone. And there's a lot of properties that are managed by the owner of the property and not a management company. And I mean, let's be honest, most people aren't staying up late at night trying to catch up on the legislative updates that the state of California is putting out. We do this professionally, and it's hard for us to stay up on it because the laws are so vague. There's so many different versions. There's so much political gamesmanship that goes along with these things that it is really tough. So if you're a landlord who manages on your own and you don't stay up on these, this is important. This one is going to bite you. Okay, the other thing I want to chat about is this is nothing new, right? There are a bunch of other states that already have similar laws. In fact, some of them are more aggressive. In fact, I just caught wind the other day of another law that's going through the process up at the state legislature that's trying to do away with security deposits and become even more restrictive. So this is not going to go away. There are already other states that are doing this. It's only going to get worse. And I'm not here to be doom and gloom. What I'm here to do is educate our listeners that this is important and this is the trend that we're seeing in our state, that there are more and more tenant protections that's bad for landlords. And if you are going to be in the landlord business, you absolutely need to know how the game is played and what the rules are. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. In fact, we aren't quite ready with it yet, but there is another law that we're going to be showcasing on the podcast and in some written content on our website, and that is Senate Bill 567. So I'll just give you a quick preview. Assembly Bill 1482 was a statewide rent control. That came out in 2020, I believe. There were some exemptions to it, and a lot of people utilize those exemptions as they should. It's available to them by the law. Well, the legislator came out with another law, like trying to eliminate exemptions, trying to make Assembly Bill 1482 more restrictive, and they passed it. And that's Senate Bill 567. So be on the lookout. We're going to put out some content on that because that also has the potential to affect you. But the reason I bring it up right now is just to demonstrate that this political shift towards protecting tenants' rights is not going away. It doesn't mean that there's not good opportunities. It doesn't mean that you can't be successful as a landlord who invests in real estate. It just means that the game is changing on you. And if you don't stay ahead of the changes, you're going to get burned. One of the provisions of Senate Bill 567 is bigger, more aggressive financial penalties for not following it. This stuff matters. I hope that makes sense. Definitely not trying to browbeat anybody over the head on, these laws, but we talk to landlords every day, and there's so many people that absolutely pay no attention and are doing things regarding managing property that we haven't been doing in 20 years, because when they first got into it and they did all their research, this was the right way to do it. Well, literally this stuff changes at a minimum once a year. When we were in COVID, they were cranking out laws faster than they could even print them. So something to stay on top of. Okay, I think at this point, let's just go over a quick refresher on what the right way to handle a security deposit is. The law does not allow you to make security deposit deductions for normal wear and tear. In fact, I think we've had a recent podcast on what the difference between damages and wear and tear was, or maybe it was a video on our website. I can't remember exactly. But if you do take your 1 month deposit, tenant moves in, tenant moves out a year later or 2 years later or whatever, and there's some wear and tear on the property, like some scratches on the floor, some scuffed paint, things along those lines, that is not a reason to make security deposit deduction. But if the tenant actually damaged the property, they took a hammer and put multiple holes in the wall or cut the floor with a knife or something crazy, that's damage. And then you can make a deduction against that security deposit. Go look at our other content about that. We went into much greater detail. But a lot of people get that confused. It's not normal wear and tear that the security deposit is for. And then if it's not normal wear and tear or damage, there's only a few things that you can also deduct, one of them being unpaid rent. So, tenant moves out. You have 21 calendar days to return that deposit. Not 21 business days, 21 weekdays, 21 calendar days. And if you don't return that deposit, you have two options. Well, one, if you just need to return it. But if you're in a spot where you can't return it, which sometimes happens in the form of you're waiting on a contractor to do a repair or something along those lines, you have to give them a good faith estimate of what the disposition is going to be and send it to them within 21 days. And then when the work's done, then you do the security deposit disposition. If you just ignore this and send it on the 25th day, your tenant can take you to small claims court, and I believe it's double the deposit that they can sue you for. That's not a position you want to be in because you didn't pay attention to the timeline that the state sets. So make sure if your tenant moves out, you handle it properly within 21 days. And when you send it back, make sure you can document that you sent it back in the form of priority mail, or, if you put it in the regular mail, they have ways of confirming delivery. Send an email to the tenant. Hey, I just want to let you know I dropped it in the mail today for you. Because ultimately, if your tenant calls you into question on whether or not you returned it in 21 days, it's going to be up to you to prove that you did. Not all those ways are 100% bulletproof. The way we do it is we notify them and we send it priority mail. And when it gets delivered, we track that. We put it in their file. And then there really eliminates the question on did you send it out in time or not. So I hope that makes sense. Just a quick little refresher on security deposits. But this law is a big deal. It is changing the way we do security deposits in California. It is not in the best interest of the landlord because it's giving you less recourse in the form of only 1 month's deposit instead of two. But it's a big deal. Make sure you pay attention. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We're happy to have a conversation. You can email us, podcast@rinconmanagement.com. If you know landlords, make sure you send this to them, or at least mention the law to them so they can go look it up themselves. But there are a lot of people who are going to get caught on the back foot with this particular issue. And if you come up against a tenant that knows the law and you don't, that's not a spot you want to be in. I can tell you that tenants are sophisticated, they know the law, and there are many organizations who are dedicated to make sure that tenants know the law and or will represent them for free in the form of pro bono legal services against landlords. So the stakes are high. I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. As always, if you like the content, please leave us a review on the platform that you listen to us with. It really makes a difference, and it helps us get the show out to more people. Once again, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.